Okay, so get this. We're going all the way back to the Garden of Eden for this deep dive.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, Adam and Eve, the whole shebang.
Uh-huh.
But hold on. We're not doing Sunday school here.
Okay.
This is about entrepreneurship in the 21st century.
Huh.
Believe it or not, what we can learn from this ancient story.
Interesting.
I know, right? So we've got these excerpts from Testo and Collado. It's a document that really digs into like the entrepreneurial parallels.
Okay.
And then we've also got this article called Introduction, Eden's Insights for Today's Christian Entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them actually kind of hit on this idea of responsibility,
Right.
which got me thinking, about the entrepreneur's role.
Yeah, it's really easy to just get swept up in, all the excitement of starting a business and everything.
Right.
But at its core, it's really about stewardship.
Of
If you
course.
think about Adam in the garden, I mean, he wasn't just, hanging out.
Yeah.
He was tasked with taking care of it, and the decisions he made impacted the entire ecosystem. It's a pretty powerful metaphor for, the impact entrepreneurs can have.
It makes you think about leadership, too. We always hear about these, CEOs and founders needing to be visionary.
Uh-huh.
But like the Garden of Eden story kind of suggests there's more to it.
Yeah.
Like, how would you connect this whole tending the garden thing to the kind of leadership skills that entrepreneurs need today?
Well, think of Adam as like a resource manager. He had to understand the balance of the garden, what needed sun, what needed shade, and how it all, worked together.
Right.
And entrepreneurs need that same understanding.
Okay.
You're not just managing, money or your inventory, but people, relationships, the impact your business has on the whole community.
It's like its own little ecosystem.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, both of these sources,
Yeah.
they make this interesting connection between the serpent tempting Adam and Eve
Mm-hmm.
and like the risky decisions that entrepreneurs face.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a brilliant way to illustrate that risk is a part of entrepreneurship.
Right.
You're faced with choices every day.
For sure.
Some could lead to amazing things, and others, well, let's just say you don't want to be banished from the garden.
I see what you did there.
The key takeaway is that not all risks are the same.
Okay, so it's not about avoiding risk altogether.
Right.
It's about being smart about it.
Exactly.
And, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve's choice,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it had some pretty big consequences.
For sure.
It makes you wonder, how can entrepreneurs today apply that lesson to their own decision-making?
Wow.
What are the tools they can use to assess risk, in a better way?
One tool that I think is helpful is a risk matrix.
Okay.
So you can visually see both the likelihood and the potential impact of different risks.
So it's like a, pros and cons list, but more sophisticated?
Yes, exactly. And it forces you to really think through those
Well,
consequences
that makes sense.
before you take action, just like Adam and Eve should have done.
Yeah, for sure. But let's be honest,
Mm-hmm.
even with the best planning, mistakes happen.
Oh, yeah.
Both sources acknowledge that Adam and Eve, well, they messed up.
They did.
But they emphasize that there's opportunity for growth even from those experiences.
Right.
And I love this quote from Ian's introduction. Eden's Insights for Today's Christian Entrepreneur.
Okay.
It says, embrace failure as a stepping stone to success.
I like that.
But how do entrepreneurs really do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to say, but when it's happening, it can feel pretty awful.
Yeah. It's all about perspective. Instead of looking at failure as the end, think, what can I learn from this? How can this make me better? It's like gathering data, refining your strategy.
Okay.
It's like Thomas Edison and the light bulb.
Oh, yeah.
He said, I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
So every misstep is just like another step toward the solution.
Exactly.
Okay, now before we move on, both sources point out that Adam and Eve had to adapt to this whole new reality after they left the garden.
Right.
How does that connect to what entrepreneurs go through?
Well, the business world can feel like that sometimes.
Right.
Things change so fast.
Yeah.
New technologies come out, markets shift, consumer preferences, you can't keep up.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs have to adapt, just like Adam and Eve did.
So it's not just about having a good idea.
No.
It's about being able to pivot when you need to embrace the change.
Mm,
Even reinvent yourself or your whole business.
exactly.
Wow.
If even the Garden of Eden could change, think about how important adaptability is for us. It's like recognizing that, change is going to happen, and the people who can roll with it and adapt and change with it, those are the ones who are going to succeed.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? Like, be adaptable? I mean, it's easy to say be more flexible, but
Right.
what are some practical steps that entrepreneurs can take to kind of cultivate that?
Well, I think it starts with your mindset. You got to be open to new information and willing to challenge what you think you know.
Okay.
Surround yourself with people who think differently than you.
Okay.
It's like having a diverse ecosystem of ideas.
Oh, I like that.
And, it helps you see opportunities that you might not have seen otherwise.
That's a good point, expanding your horizons both personally and professionally.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of learning.
Oh, yeah.
Reading industry stuff, attending conferences, or even just talking to people outside your field.
Mhm.
That's how you stay ahead and anticipate those shifts in the market.
So it's like you're always looking out for those changes.
Right.
Like Adam and Eve probably had to do when they left.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about responsibility, risk, adaptation,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something else in the Garden of Eden story that I think we need to talk about,
Okay.
especially for modern business.
Mm-hmm.
That's temptation.
Ah, yes. Temptation, the classic tale as old as time, and entrepreneurs are definitely not immune to it. In fact, the business world, it's so fast-paced, high stakes.
It is.
It can be a breeding ground for all sorts of temptations.
It's like that image,
Yeah.
the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, the devil might be whispering things like, cut corners or
Right.
chase after that shiny new trend, even if it doesn't really fit with your values.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that the Garden of Eden story, it really does have some insightful psychological parallels.
Okay.
The serpent doesn't force Eve to eat the fruit.
Right.
He tempts her.
Oh, yeah.
He plays on her curiosity, her desire for knowledge.
He's a master manipulator,
He is.
preying on her desires and insecurities.
Exactly.
It makes me think about how entrepreneurs need to be so careful.
Yeah,
There are always going to be people trying to sell them something,
right.
promising them the world,
Mhm.
So developing that inner compass, knowing what's truly right for you, your business, that's crucial.
That's where self-awareness is so important. Understanding your values, your strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
It's essential for navigating those tempting crossroads.
Yeah, because when you know who you are and what you stand for,
Exactly.
it's easier to resist those shiny distractions.
Yeah.
That might lead you astray.
It's like building up your entrepreneurial immune system
I love that.
to those temptations that could really derail you.
So what's the key takeaway here for our listener?
Well, I think the most important lesson is that, temptation is part of being human.
It is.
The key is to recognize it when it pops up, understand where it's coming from, and then make choices that align with your long-term goals and values.
So it's about recognizing that you have a choice
Exactly.
in how you respond to those tempting situations.
Right.
Okay, so as we wrap up this Garden of Eden deep dive,
Right.
what stands out to you as the most surprising connection?
Let me think.
Yeah.
What really struck me was this emphasis on adaptation.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to think of the Garden of Eden as this perfect paradise that
Right.
never changes.
Yeah.
But the story itself is all about change.
That's true.
Adam and Eve are forced to leave. They have to adapt to a new environment, figure out how to survive.
Yeah.
And isn't that what entrepreneurship is all about?
It really is like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly.
You get thrown into a new situation, you have to face the unknown, and that's when your resourcefulness and creativity come out.
And it's not just reacting to change, it's about shaping the future.
Oh, okay.
Think about those innovators who really shook things up.
Mm.
They didn't just adapt to what was already there.
Right.
They imagined something totally new.
Yeah.
They took that experience of being thrown into a new reality and said, okay, now what?
I love that.
How can I use what I know to
Yeah.
create something better, something that didn't exist before?
It's like they were channeling that same energy that Adam and Eve needed to survive.
Exactly.
They had to innovate, come up with new solutions to thrive in a totally different world.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring when you think about it.
Yep.
It changes how you see the Garden of Eden story.
In what way?
It's not just about messing up. It's about the beginning of human ingenuity, the spark that started our journey of innovation.
And that's what I find so inspiring about this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we all have that potential to adapt, to create, to make a difference,
Absolutely. It's a call to action for all of us,
especially entrepreneurs.
especially entrepreneurs, to embrace that creative spirit, to push boundaries, and to never stop innovating.
Well said. Okay, before we go, I want to leave our listener with one final thought.
Right.
If even the Garden of Eden, this seemingly perfect paradise, could change, what does that tell us about how important adaptability and resilience are for our own ventures?
That's a good question. It reminds us that change is inevitable,
Right.
and the people who can embrace it, who can adapt and evolve, they're the ones who will succeed in the long run.
That's a great point to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
It's been really insightful.
It has.
And to you, our listener, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
We hope this exploration has given you some new ideas and maybe even inspired you to see the world and your own journey through a fresh lens. We've been talking about all this like responsibility and risk and adaptation.
Yeah.
But it makes me think about something else that entrepreneurs deal with like all the time.
What's that?
Fear.
Oh, yeah.
Fear of the unknown, fear of making the wrong choice.
Uh-huh.
How can this Garden of Eden story help us deal with those feelings?
Well, because fear can really stop you from doing anything.
It can't.
It can keep you from taking risks, innovating, even starting at all.
Right.
But what's interesting is that in the Garden of Eden story,
Yeah.
it wasn't fear that made Adam and Eve mess up.
Oh.
It was a different kind of temptation.
No.
The temptation of wanting easy answers, wanting shortcuts, believing that there's a way to avoid, the natural process of growing and learning.
That's interesting. It's like they wanted to avoid being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Avoid the possibility of failing.
Right. And don't we see that all the time in business?
Oh, totally.
The get rich quick schemes, the pressure to have all the answers, the fear of looking clueless.
It's everywhere.
And I think the Garden of Eden story gives us a way to think differently about that.
Okay.
It reminds us that growth and progress, it's usually not easy.
It's not.
There will be setbacks, mistakes, times when you feel lost and uncertain.
Right.
But it's in those moments when you're uncomfortable, when you have to face your fears and find new ways forward.
Yeah.
That's when you discover how resilient you are and how much you can innovate.
So it's like the Garden of Eden is saying, embrace the mess, embrace the uncertainty,
Exactly.
embrace the possibility of failing.
Because that's where the real learning happens.
So for entrepreneurs, it's about changing how we think about fear.
Yeah, it's not about getting rid of fear.
Right.
It's about understanding it, acknowledging it, and then using it to move you forward.
So it's not about being fearless.
Right.
It's about being courageous, even when you are afraid.
Exactly. It's about knowing that fear is normal.
And it doesn't have to stop you.
I think that's something anyone can relate to, not just entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah. Anyone facing a challenge.
Right.
The Garden of Eden story reminds us that we can overcome challenges, adapt to change, and create something meaningful.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Who knew that a story about a garden could be so relevant to entrepreneurs today?
It just goes to show, the most important lessons can come from the most unexpected places.
That's true.
And if we look deeper, we can find those timeless truths that can help us on our own journeys.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this?
I would say embrace that entrepreneurial spirit of Adam and Eve.
Right.
Be responsible with your resources. Be smart about the risks you take. Learn from your mistakes and never stop adapting and innovating.
That's great.
But most importantly, don't let fear stop you from going after your dreams and creating something amazing.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the Garden of Eden.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, dear listener,
Yes.
keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the limits of what's possible.